Our story begins with a girl peeking into a room where she sees a man walking with a gun. When he leaves her sight, she runs in with her brother. They are both scared. The boy gets more scared by seeing a lady with white eyes. His sister has to hold his mouth so that he stays silent. Then a young man comes to them to point a gun at the girl. He fires, but we don't see the result of it. The scene changes drastically to the young man standing elsewhere, talking to a doctor, supposedly. What we just witnessed was him telling the doctor about his dream. He says he had that dream many times, and it's never him who is holding the gun. The doctor responds that it implies his acceptance of responsibility. He also says that he overcame his delusion in his conscious and subconscious mind. The scene changes again to that doctor at a meeting with his patient, whose name is Tim. According to the doctor, Tim is now healthy. He thinks his patient should be discharged on his 21st birthday. Following this, we see a young lady walking into an auction room. She witnesses a mirror that's referred to as the Lasser glass being auctioned. Its details are gone over by the auctioneer. Meanwhile, the doctor tells Tim it is important that he reconnects with his sister. What's even more important is that he needs to protect his recovery. Once Tim leaves the hospital, he sees his sister waiting for him. She is Kaylee, the young lady who occupied the auction room. They are happy to see each other. The two soon sit at a restaurant together. Kaylee informs him that he could stay with them. She also says certain people did not allow her to see him. But that's not an issue, he says. He needed to figure some things out for himself. Shortly after, she tells him she found something. This statement makes him look at her, concerned, asking what she means. Yet she knows that he knows what she means. The conversation continues cryptically, with her mentioning the difficulty of having acquired something. They have a few days until something happens, though it should be enough. Again, Tim asks what she means. Supposedly, they kept a promise to eliminate something. Afterward, we travel back in time by 11 years. A house is moved into by a family. We see Kaylee with Tim as kids. Movers bring the Lasser glass into their father's room. We then get a moment to see the parents talk to each other. Back in the present, the siblings enter a hotel room. Kaylee asks him if he wants this over the guest room at her place. Tim thinks it's best to stay at the hotel. Before she goes, she tells him he promised her he would never forget what happened. His sole reply is that he was 10 years old. Since she is doing something tomorrow night, she could use his help. Later, their mother, Marie, tells her husband, Alan, that her scar was more noticeable 10 years ago. We wonder what caused the scar on her lower stomach. At night, Alan gets some juice. As he walks in the darkness, he momentarily perceives the lady with the white eyes. It seems like he didn't believe his eyes, because he doesn't act scared. He walks into his room with the fancy mirror, and notices he spilled some juice on himself in the reflection. At another time, Kaylee gets up because she hears a dog barking outside. She walks into her dad's room to look at the Lasser glass. Upon turning around, her father is there to start choking her. Thankfully, it is only a nightmare she's having. Her boyfriend, Michael, calms her. On the next day at her job, Kaylee receives photos from Michael of disturbing images that were printed from her computer. She quickly takes them to hide the photos under a folder. He starts talking about the Lasser glass, having found out that she wants to repair it. But he can't keep his curiosity under control. He wants to know why she printed those pictures. All she can say to him is that she's dealing with some dark matters in her life. She does not expect him to ever understand that part of her. So Kaylee promises that things will return to normal. In a storage room full of valuable items, Kaylee removes the cover from the Lasser glass to look at it. For some reason, she tells it that it must be hungry. Touching the crack on the bottom, she says she hopes it still hurts. Then she sees a covered figure slightly move behind her in the mirror's reflection. Yet turning around shows her nothing. It prompts her to come to one of the 3 covered objects to remove its cover. It shows her an ordinary statue. The second one shows her the same. As she is about to remove the 3rd cover, the man who moves the items surprises her with his presence. She soon looks back to find that the 3rd covered figure is gone. It seems like it was never there. Kaylee looks in the mirror, saying she will see it at home. After that, she gets a call from Tim. He wants to meet her somewhere for them to talk more. She tells him to come by the house. Since she means the house of their childhood, this causes Tim to end the call. Back in the past, Marie checks her plants and is disappointed they are shriveling. While her children play outside, Kaylee stands near a window to catch her father with a lady in the mirror's reflection. During dinner, Alan notices blood on his fingernail. He gets up to tend to it. Kaylee asks him who the lady was that she saw with him in his office. We don't know if he acts confused or is truly confused, but he follows his behavior by asking what his daughter means. At that moment, the past dissolves into the present as Tim looks at the location where the table once stood. Shortly after, his sister arrives with a dog. She advises Tim to look around the house. While he's doing that, he walks into a room with some potted plants. In there, he takes notice of a chain installed into the wall. Kaylee comes over to him, saying she thinks they should sell the house. The next scene has them bringing the mirror into the house together. There are cameras near where it was placed. A crucial moment then arrives, with Kaylee turning on the cameras to start recording herself talking at length about a heavy subject. Her brother instantly doesn't want to be a part of it. The main part of her recording is to prove that the Lasser glass is home to a supernatural force. According to her research, it is responsible for about 45 people losing their lives in its 400 years of recorded existence. The origin of the Lasser glass is unknown. Yet its first interesting case began in London in 1754. Cayley shows a picture of Philip Lasser, the 17th Earl of Leicester. Having acquired the mirror, he hung it over his fireplace. The next year, he was found burnt inside it. One of the family's stewards claimed to see Philip reflected in the mirror. Due to this accusation, the church issued a warrant to investigate the house. Following this devastating event, the Lasser glass was sold in an auction in 1758. The next victim of the demonic mirror is Robert Clancy in 1864, an American railroad tycoon. The man was said to be over 300 pounds. He hung the mirror in his ballroom. Later that year, he weighed considerably less. In a few weeks, he lost his life. The cause of his demise is unknown. Ben Cayley says the Lasser glass got lost in 1865. It resurfaced in New England at the start of the 20th century. After she goes over 2 more unfortunate victims, an alarm goes off for them to eat. As they are doing that, Tim asks his sister who this recording is for. Cayley claims it's to everyone who called their father and Tim a murderer. Tim replies that they were kids who made up a story to not accept that their dad was a murderer. To Tim, that's exactly who their dad was. The only response Cayley thinks is appropriate is to slap him. He is not allowed to speak such words about their father. After that, Cayley keeps talking about more mirror owners. Tim has to intervene to tell her there is a difference between correlation and causation. He mentions how they got a couch in a certain year. In that year, many bad things happen. His point is whether that couch is responsible for those bad things taking place. Cayley ignores his rhetoric, wanting to continue. Now she shows a photo of the most relevant of all the mirror owners, their father, Alan. 2 weeks after having acquired the mirror, their mom suffered a psychological breakdown. She was brought to her demise by their dad. Tim adds that he shot him for that. That is when Cayley shifts to another important aspect of her presentation, her wanting to prove that none of the people she described were responsible for what happened to them. She says there is a supernatural force in the mirror. At this point, Tim wonders why they can't just break it. We get a brief flashback to them as kids, striking at something we don't see. It is very likely the mirror. In the present, Cayley encourages him to smash it, so he comes to it with a stool. He uncovers the mirror, looking at his reflection. He then starts talking, prompting Cayley to ask him why he put down the stool. He notices that he did, and possibly rationalizes it by giving the reason that he's trying to talk to her. This causes Cayley to talk about the one person who was documented to try breaking the Lasser glass. He wanted to do it very much, though he never delivered a single blow to it. Instead, he walked out of the building into traffic. Cayley says the mirror defends itself. It did it to that man, along with just now disarming Tim. However, her brother still doesn't believe her. He says the reason why he didn't break it is that it's not his to break. He adds that no one can break another person's delusion for them. One has to do it themselves. That leads Cayley to talk about the final thing, the trap she has set up to smash the mirror. She shows how an anchor descends from the ceiling into a hole in the wall. It functions on a timer. The trap is quite smart because it doesn't involve direct human intention. Once the timer goes off, the anchor will slam into it. Of course, the intention to destroy the Lasser glass is still there, but it's not so available. Back in the past, Alan works in his office. After removing the band-aid from his finger, he notices it is on again. Trying to take it off a second time proves to be a more difficult task. He takes a staple remover to take it off, before returning to his senses to see he removed his fingernail. At that moment, our attention is brought to the mirror, like it caused it to happen. Then he sees a book on the floor. It makes him talk to his children about having been clear that he doesn't want them messing around in his office. All they can say is they haven't been in there. Afterward, we see the many books that are lying there, positioned in a certain way on purpose. They didn't do that, is what Cayley says. Returning to the present, Cayley goes over several cases of the Lasser glass owners having shriveling plants. That is likely the reason there are many plants collected in the house. Tim continues with his opposing mindset, saying how all the plants in this house are still alive. Doesn't he remember they brought in the mirror just recently? Cayley tells him to give it some time, which he should have known. She also says there was another variable of the Lasser glass. This is when we switch to the dog she brought in. She covers it in its cage near the mirror. After that, Tim looks at another dog in the house. Looking at it causes a flashback. They tell their dog, Mason, to go fetch, yet it just lies there. The next scene has Alan holding a gun, telling Marie he got it so she could feel safe. She feels the opposite of safe, having it around. To that, Alan says he will lock it away. He intends to keep it for emergency purposes. As she is leaving his office, she hears him insult her. It makes her turn around in shock to ask the man to repeat himself, but he says no words came from him. Marie leaves the room upset. At night, she wakes up in bed, seeing her husband is not by her side. Hearing barking, she comes downstairs to witness Mason barking near Alan's office. The animal bites her because she tries to get it out. With Mason gone, Alan lets her in. She questions why he didn't stop the barking, along with telling him what their dog did. After she says he's lost in his world, Alan gets angry. Cayley lies in bed, hearing the unnerving arguing between her parents. On another day, with Alan out of the house, Marie lets Mason into Alan's office due to the dog wanting to come in. It probably senses the evil energy of the mirror. Shortly after, Marie tries to open the doors, yet they are locked. Upon Alan's return, she tells him where Mason is. He enters his office to find the dog isn't there. The good news is that the room looks perfectly fine. like no dog ever entered. In the present time, Tim thinks his sister is remembering it wrong. She says she is not. He tells her Mason was sick. He also thinks her memories are lying to her. Since he behaves like this, Kaylee believes something was done to him in the hospital. He retaliates with a statement to show she's the crazy one, by asking what is more likely, that she wrongly remembered the events from 11 years ago, or that the mirror eats dogs. This prompts him to uncover the dog in the cage, showing it is still there. Again, she tells Tim to give it some time to work. Switching to the past, Kaylee keeps hearing her parents argue with one another. It soon brings both of the kids downstairs to witness it. As Marie is putting the girl to bed, Kaylee asks her if they are fighting due to the lady in her dad's office. We don't get to hear Marie respond. Instead, we return to the present time, where the heated discussion between the siblings continues. They just can't come to agree with each other. Kaylee tells him he has to remember that lady, because he saw her too. Tim says he convinced himself that he saw many things, but he questions what they truly saw. The only thing he's certain of witnessing is their parents arguing at night. At that moment, we briefly re-enter the past to see Alan with the other lady in his office. Tim tells her their father was having an affair. He also lost his mind, which brought an end to their mom. Tim thinks he was going to do the same to them. However, his sister isn't buying his badly reasoned conclusions. They are bad, because their father's cheating doesn't explain their mom's deteriorated physical condition before she passed away. This all leads back to her thinking that something was done to Tim in the hospital. He was normal going in there, yet crazy coming out. He then starts taking the dog out to save it from Kaylee's experimentation. It runs to the door, which he opens for it to escape. Despite their arguing, he loves his sister, because he wants her to understand that he had helped dealing with this profound situation, whereas she was left alone with it. He says these problems are hard to overcome. All this makes Kaylee cry. Tim advises her that they get out of there and go to any location she wants. Shortly after, she walks to look into the room with the laser glass, pointing to something that happened there. Tim joins her to observe the plants there have withered along with the cameras facing each other. This happening excites Kaylee, because it gives her proof of the mirror's paranormal power. Tim, though, simply cannot believe it. Kaylee starts watching the footage, which shows the duo that it was them who positioned the cameras that way. Kaylee does not remember doing that. She also thinks the mirror drew this energy from the dog that ran away. Going into the other room, she notices withered plants and healthy ones. The further ones are alive, making her conclude that the radius of the mirror's influence is about 30 feet. Suddenly, Tim goes outside to call someone. Whoever he's trying to call cannot be reached. When his sister calls out to him, he reappears in the house. It flabbergasts him how that happened, but she says he never left. Does he believe in the power of the mirror now? Another flashback shows Kaylee coming to her mom, as the latter just stands looking at the mirror with a vacuum cleaner in one hand. At another hour, the family sits at the table with Marie stressed. She tells her kids she does not know where their father is. She only knows where he says he is. Then she wants to hear more about the lady in the office from Kaylee, wanting to preserve whatever peace of mind her mother has left. The girl says she hasn't seen the lady. Tim doesn't understand that his sister lied for a good reason, so he says he saw her. This causes Marie to cry. The boy thinks that the lady stays in his dad's office. After that, Marie goes there, finding a paper that contains many scribbles of the name Marisol. She cries some more, followed by her knocking down several of Alan's things in anger. After picking them up, she throws a pen at the wall near the mirror. This action seems to awaken the demonic device. It discharges some force into Marie. Her reflection in the laser glass no longer mimics her. Marie's eyes turn white. Her children soon hear her scream. It prompts them to rush down to look at her in worry. She starts choking Tim. Kaylee frees him, and they run upstairs. The siblings hide in their room while she bangs on the door. It doesn't take long for Alan to return home, witnessing the unusual behavior of his wife. Upon coming to her, she grabs him, forcing the man to hold her down. He sits on the floor with her lying unconscious on top of him. Alan calls the emergency number. At this moment, the laser glass does something that causes him to put the phone down. He gets up, affected somehow, to start dragging her away. Back in the present, Kaylee starts setting all the equipment in its proper place again. Tim notices a light flickering. This reminds him of the past, where a similar light flickered when his father told them some important news. He says their mom is very sick. Due to that, they are to stay clear of the room she resides in. Kaylee wants to know her mom's condition, only to have her inquiry ignored. Alan just tells his kids they could be in his office. As another light flickers, it brings Tim to the present time. The next scene has Kaylee changing light bulbs. She has to place down the apple she's eating. The light bulb on the counter touches it. Picking the apple up to eat it, Kaylee painfully discovers she has just bitten into a light bulb. Her mouth is full of blood. The laser glass is truly playing with them now. They have to destroy it soon, before it forces them to destroy themselves. Tim then gets her attention, showing Kaylee that her experience was not true. The apple was in her hand the whole time. Her mouth is also fine, without a drop of blood. All she can say is that they should stay together. In the past again, the kids are hungry. Unfortunately, their refrigerator does not contain anything to reverse that. Kaylee urges her dad they need to get food. But the man is not in his right mind. He keeps staring at the mirror, while giving his daughter the same answer to several different questions. Kaylee has had enough of this nonsense. If the situation is going to continue in this abnormal state, she's going to take matters into her own hands. Therefore, she goes against her father's instructions and enters her mom's room. Yet she isn't in bed. Kaylee sees shattered pieces of a bowl on the floor. Walking toward them, she gets surprised by her mother coming at her like the latter is possessed. Thankfully, she is restrained by the chain Tim looked at earlier. Kaylee rushes out of the room. Alan gets upset once she reports this incident to him. He grounds both of his kids. In the present time, Kaylee wakes up, standing near the mirror where the anchor is supposed to slam down. She rushes to reset the timer, thinking it was a clever move from the laser glass. Soon the house loses electricity, so Kaylee sets up lamps that use their own power. As she sets up the one near the chain, she finds a shard there, like it was 11 years ago. Picking it up, she knows it's not real. In the past, Tim comes to his dad's room, where he sees the evil lady. She terrifies him to run to his room. The grown-up Tim watches his younger self be scared in his room. It seems like the mirror has connected their minds to the past. They are simultaneously living in the past and the present. Kaylee goes downstairs to find more shards on the floor. She uses her phone's camera to reveal their non-existent nature. Then she turns to the side to perceive her possessed mom. She instantly stabs her in the neck with the shard she's holding. In reality, it is Michael she stabbed. The man appears to lose his life. Not wanting to believe that he's gone, Kaylee reasons she couldn't have ended him, because the shard is not real. Her reasoning is ineffective, though. She checks the scene using her phone camera to witness that Michael is actually bleeding. Now she cries for him. Tim is there to take his sister outside. He calls the police, saying all they need to do is wait. Afterward, all the lights return to the house. The siblings observe one of the strangest things, another pair of them within the house. Tim says it's a trick to get them back inside, but Kaylee smartly counters him by saying it could also be a trick to keep them standing outside, while the real them stand in front of the mirror, waiting for the anchor to claim their lives. It is indeed something to think about. Which pair is the real one? She tells him to call the police again. Doing that gives Tim a very strange operator, who deteriorates into talking nonsense. Kaylee is left with no choice except to break the phone. Tim still thinks they should stay outside. The next scene has Alan leaning against the demonic mirror. He soon starts loading his gun. Tim sees him doing it and reports it to his sister. She wants to smash the mirror. In the present, the duo return to the house to see the other them standing near the laser glass. The evil lady appears there, slowly walking toward them. She speaks using their dad's voice, saying they are not supposed to play in this room. At that point, Kaylee sees the young Tim standing near her instead of the adult. After he runs away, they both run as children until they hide in a room. Alan then comes to his restrained wife to point the gun at her. However, he doesn't fire. He undoes her restraint instead. Following this, the siblings wake up in the washroom as adults. Tim says the mirror placed them there. He urges Kaylee that they need to get downstairs before the anchor swings. So he opens the door to see their possessed mother behind it. They have to hold it closed together. They are now kids again. After collecting themselves, they start running from the washroom. Their mom is there, who Kaylee strikes with a golf club. The girl ends up exiting the house by jumping from a window. Out there, she sees the evil lady standing with an evil man behind the window. She goes back into the house for her brother. Her mom comes at her to start choking the helpless girl on the floor. As she does that, the evil force seems to leave her for some reason, and she lets go of her daughter. But Alan is there to shoot her several times. The kids run away, seeing other possessed people in the process. That is when we arrive at the opening scene of our story. The kids wait for their dad to leave, allowing them to run to the mirror before striking at it with golf clubs. Yet what they're truly hitting is the wall near it. Tim realizes that it won't let them do it. As an adult, he says the same thing. Then Alan comes behind them to point his gun at the young Kaylee. He tells her he has seen the devil, in addition to the devil being him. At that moment, Tim strikes his hand for the man to drop the gun. He starts choking the girl instead. Tim picks up the gun, yelling at his father to let go of Kaylee. He actually listens to his son. He also gets on his knees and puts his hand on the trigger of the gun while Tim holds it. He tells his son to run prior to shooting the gun for him. That is how the mirror got its crack in its corner. We notice that both of their parents at least partially return to their senses before losing their lives. After that depressing event, many of the possessed people enter the room. We don't know how the kids escaped this situation. The alarm, though, returns Tim to the present. He wakes up in front of the mirror, yelling out for Kaylee. We see she is her young version in the office. Her mother calls out to her from the mirror in her normal, non-possessed form. She extends herself from the evil instrument to hug Kaylee. At that time, Tim manually moves the timer so that the anchor descends. To his great dismay, the thing that was supposed to destroy the laser glass ends up slamming into his beloved sister. He yells out to her in grief, but she is no longer of this world. The final scene has Tim handcuffed outside. We see him getting taken by the police, just like he was as a kid. Both versions yell out that the mirror did this, not him. He rides away in the back seat of a police car, seeing all three of his deceased family members behind the window of the house. If someone is destined to destroy the evil mirror, it wasn't this family.